Split Fiction is the latest co-op adventure from Hazelight Studios, the team behind A Way Out and It Takes Two. With Split Fiction, we see two aspiring writers falling into a simulation of the worlds that they created, with one being a sci-fi writer and the other a fantasy writer. Well, having played the game on PlayStation 5, and with it being a two-player experience, we decided to mix up the review format this time around, so today I'm joined by my co-op partner in crime, Stephen Tailby, to dig into what makes Split Fiction so special. So hello everyone, my name is Aaron, this is Push Square, and this is our Split Fiction PS5 review. First things first, did you enjoy the game, Stephen?
Yeah. I massively enjoyed it. I think part of it is just good company, obviously, because as with their other games, these are co-op only. You have to play this two-player, and I think that inherently just makes a game more enjoyable in some circumstances. Anyway, I think if you have enjoyed A Way Out, if you've enjoyed It Takes Two, this is that, but a few steps above what they've done before. It's so enjoyable, the whole way through. It's really quick paced. I mean, if you dwell on the story, the premise too much, it you can start to see some cracks, but they don't waste any time getting control into your hands, and as soon as they do, it's just fun from beginning to end.
Yeah, I think we said when we first started it was 1 minute we're watching some cinematic that's set up, and then 30 seconds later we're running through explosions and dragons and all sorts of stuff. I think this is easily the best game that they've made, just purely from, you're saying, it's so fast paced, and their whole thing now has been kind of solidified at this point that they are the guys that mess around with gameplay mechanics. They try out different styles and stuff, and there was a lot of that in It Takes Two, but this is just in a completely different level. We've spoke about it before, but it reminded me of Astrobot in the way that they would do something really cool and really fun and then just be okay, we're done with that now. But yeah, like you say with the story, I view it sort of like a 90s You watch some cheesy 90s film, and it's you're not really necessarily there to get into the semantics of how things work. The focus of this game is the co-op gameplay experience, and I think the story is at its best when it's more exploring the worlds that these two characters have created. What did you think of the main characters? We had Zoe and Mio.
So I played as Mio and you played as Zoe, and I think that's probably the right way around, because I feel like you're more of an extrovert, and I am much more of a kind of locked down introverted guy, which is kind of the same way around that they are, So Zoe is the fantasy writer. She's I think slightly older, and she's very optimistic and bubbly and outgoing. And then Mio is this American writer who is very closed off and gives her the cold shoulder a bit to begin with. Doesn't really kind of accept any of her invitations to talk. Early on, it can feel like Mio is a bit frosty and a bit mean, maybe. But what's nice about the game is that the story, I think, is handled a bit better here than in their previous games, where the relationship between the two of them, obviously they begin as complete strangers, but by the end they're really good friends, and that relationship feels like it builds up much more naturally, and the way that Mio kind of comes out of her shell and starts to divulge some information later on, it's way better for me than It Takes Two was.
I had some issues actually, the way that It Takes Two developed, where obviously the premise of that game is a couple on the brink of divorce and being dolls and working their way through their child's bedroom. Basically, was the whole idea is they would kind of be a bit closer by the end, and I felt with that game there was a point where just they were being nice to each other now and they were really friendly. But this, I do think, is a lot better, because I agree with to start off, I wasn't too sure, to be honest, if I liked Mio much, and I knew that that's what the game was going for. It took a little bit longer to get there than I thought it would, but I liked the friendship that the two of them had by the end of this game. I thought it was really naturally paced, and I liked that. My favorite thing about this game, really, in terms of its story, was that the worlds that they're exploring are their own. We might be exploring a story that they've written 10 years ago, and they were in a different place and different things were going on in their life. So it was almost like you were learning more about them through their worlds that they had created, which were nice to look at and fun to play through. But it was also like forcing the characters to open up to each other, because in a way they could say like, that evil villain just said something that must mean something in your real world, And I liked those aspects, and it kind of forced them to open up to each other. Let's pivot away from the story though to talk about the gameplay. I think It Takes Two felt really nice, to be honest. Like I wouldn't really criticize that too much, and it feels much the same in a lot of ways, with like double jump and the dash and the grapple. The variety of the gameplay stuff here was just insane to me. I felt like it was changing it up so much, and we said several times throughout this could be its own game. Did you ever feel like it got a little tired or a little repetitive or anything like that?
No, not for me. I think, like you said, we both kind of were like taken aback by like how much they were changing it up. What's really special about this game is kind of two-pronged, and like one of them is the fact that it's so varied and like they're constantly introducing new mechanics. What makes it even better is that every one of those sequences is just really well executed. Like all of it is really fun to play, and it's all very intuitive as well. There was a moment where, like quite early on, where we're piloting this like quite big kind of military ship thing, and one of us is flying the ship and the other is controlling the gun, shooting down the enemies. And then like you move to the next level and you're running away from these like really nasty trolls, and no matter what the game gives you, you always feel in control. You always know what's expected of you. It's just super cohesive and just really well executed. One
thing we did touch upon in our written review was that this is more difficult than what we got in It Takes Two. I played through that game with my wife, and she's not a gamer, but she managed it fairly well. Obviously there were struggles at parts, but like generally speaking, she knew how to control the game and got on quite well with it. But this game, we both said throughout it, this is more difficult. Do you think that's a bad thing within the context of these types of games?
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. What's nice about Split Fiction is that the controls are very similar to It Takes Two, so you can kind of graduate from It Takes Two to Split Fiction, and it is a bit tougher. There are moments where it really turns up the heat, and like we were struggling a little bit, and we've been playing games like since we were born or whatever. And
for the moment we were born,
controller in a hand.
Like I say, I think more gamers are going to play this than non-gamers, so it makes sense to make it more with that side in mind. And I think as well it made it really fun for us, because like, I found It Takes Two fun, but there were points where maybe my interest would dip a little, but like most of the time I felt like we were actively engaged in like trying to figure out what was happening, and we were having to properly communicate with each other, which kind of ties into the performance aspects as well. I mean, we played this entirely online, and the latency is like it was pinpoint. I mean, we had points that really were down to the timing of you letting go or activating something and me jumping at this time, and like it really required that like on point precision with the controllers and the timing, and I thought it done such a good job with that. I mean, performance wise it was great across the board. We really had no issues, did we?
No, nothing really. And like I was on a standard PS5 and you were on PS5 Pro, and neither of us had any kind of performance issues, and like you said, no latency really at all on like playing online. It was really like just very well polished
and really nice graphically. I think this one compared to not that It Takes Two was a bad looking game,
especially with the environments, like some of the vistas that you come out to. You walk up a hill and then there's a really lovely like picturesque scene in front of you, and you're like, wow, I can't wait to explore this place. And it does that like several times. Some of the side stories as well, which I don't think we've spoken about yet, also do this, and in some ways this won't spoil anything, but some of the side stories have some of the most visually kind of striking moments in the game.
Yeah, the side stories were a real surprise to me. When we played the first one, it was likely the weakest one I think that we did play, and I remember being a little like, okay, well I suppose these are sort of fun, but like you don't really get anything from them in a gameplay reward type of way. After that point when we went into it, and it was kind of like clicked in my head how these were the gameplay variety aspects. Like, it allowed them to go wild with the visual design, the gameplay design, and it ended up being the thing I think that made the game for me. Every time we saw a side story, it was like, oh, there's one there, and you never quite knew what you were going to get with them as well. Like, some of them were really cool. They had really cool, almost like story background details, and some of them were just like the gameplay. It was like a bit of fun, whether it was a race or something. Like, you should do all of them. It didn't become an optional thing for me. I felt like this was like an integral part to the experience.
They're shorter, and they, like you said, they really allow the studio to kind of like vary things up even more than they already were. Mm-hmm. And you say in our written review on the site that the side stories kind of gel for you in a narrative sense as well.
We've been talking a little bit about It Takes Two, and It Takes Two is like a fun game, but it had a wacky kind of sensibility to it where you just had to roll with it whenever it done something new gameplay wise or story wise. You're like, okay, this is this type of bit, cool. But for me, like, premise wise, there was something in my brain that I liked about it where it made sense, where, like, we don't want to go too much into detail with these because I think they are worth exploring your own, but like, maybe one of them was like a far more family friendly styled aspect where you're like, this is a story that she wrote as a child, and like that I thought was such a cool idea within the premise of the game, which is why I liked the story so much more here. And I like that, like, the environments and the levels themselves are revealing about the characters. But I liked that the side stories had the ability to dig into the characters a bit more, or just go and have fun with the premise itself. So those were really some of my favourite aspects. Before we wrap up though, I think, not to spoil anything because we're not going to here, the final stretch of this game is, in my opinion, probably one of the best things I've played in a long time. The two of us playing through this last bit, I felt like we're a couple of children just constantly going like, whoa, oh, that's really cool. Is so much. It was one of the most like inventive stages of a game I think I've played. It was just and it really, to me, felt like he's like actually showing off and like flexing the muscles of like, we've done this really cool and inventive and varied game, but let's dial it up to like 11 for this last stretch. And I had so much fun with that.
You were saying to me that like the finale of It Takes Two, it was strange to kind of end on May's aspiration to be a singer, right? It was just like a bit of an odd place to kind of like wrap up the gameplay of that game. But they've really gone for like a collaborative, like it's about both of them, and they're working together, and it capitalizes on that co-op theme in such a creative way. It's so hard to talk about because it's amazing, but like, you can't really say why. I just hope that people trust us when we say that the finale of Split Fiction is possibly the best bit of a Hazelight game. And it's in the best Hazelight game. It
made me realize so much, like, I had the fun that I'd been having the whole way through, and I felt like that was it personified in like a single aspect or a single moment of the game. It just, I didn't, at that point, I could play so much more of this. So, I've just been so impressed. So yeah, this one is landing the big old 10 out of 10 from us here at Pushscript. It was a score that was deliberated over many debates, but this is a truly special game, and for me, I think, it's going to be a tough call to topple Split Fiction for my game of the year. For me, personally, I think it's really going to take something to get this down.
It's going to be up there. I think, obviously we've got several months of the year still to go. So it's hard to write everything off.
The beginning of March, yes.
But it's definitely an early contender.
Thank you for checking out our review for Split Fiction, a very different style but a worthy one to try it out on with the full 10 out of 10 score. I want to thank Stephen for jumping on the channel with me and playing through the game with me. We had such a blast, but I want to know your plans. Are you planning to pick this game up, and who do you plan to play it with? Remember, this has a feature called Friend Pass, so only one of you actually has to own the game, and that's regardless of platform. So you could buy it on PlayStation 5 and a friend of yours on Xbox or PC could play with you for free. It's such a cool feature, but let me know your plans down in the comments below. But as always, thank you so much for watching the video, and until next time, I've been Aaron, and this has been Push Square.